My name is Patricia Caldwell. I'm 63 years old, and 3 days ago my daughter called me dead weight in front of 40 people. I'm writing this because someone needs to know the truth before it's too late.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
The boardroom at EdTech Solutions smelled like expensive coffee and betrayal that Tuesday morning. I sat in my usual chair, third from the left, next to the window overlooking downtown Austin, holding the quarterly reports I'd spent 2 weeks preparing. My reading glasses were new, purchased at CVS for $18s. 99 because I couldn't afford the ones my optometrist recommended for $340. That's what happens when you pour everything into building someone else's dream. Melissa stood at the head of the table in her $2,400 Armani suit. My daughter, the CEO, 38 years old and absolutely radiant with the kind of confidence that comes from never having struggled for anything. Her presentation slides flickered behind her, showing projected growth of 340% over the next fiscal year. Beautiful numbers. Completely fictional, but beautiful. As we move into Q4, she said, clicking to the next slide, we need to streamline operations and eliminate redundancies. I'd heard that corporate speak before. It usually meant someone was about to lose their job. I just didn't realize that someone was me. Richard, my son-in-law, sat across from me. He wore his customary smirk, the one that made him look like he knew secrets you didn't. As CFO, he'd been very busy lately. Too busy to return my calls about the missing $87,000 from the operations budget. Too busy to explain why our largest client had suddenly canceled their 3-year contract worth $1. $2 million. Patricia, Melissa said, turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You've been with the company since the beginning. 23 years is a long time. My stomach clenched. Around the table, department heads suddenly became very interested in their laptops. Sarah Chen from HR looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Marcus Webb from sales studied his coffee cup as if it contained the secrets of the universe. It is, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I remember when we operated out of my garage. When you were 15 and complained about having to answer phones after school. A few uncomfortable laughs. Melissa's smile tightened. Yes, well, times change. The market changes. We need leadership that understands modern technology, social media marketing, AI integration. I wrote the code for our first learning management system. I interrupted quietly. I taught myself Python, JavaScript, and SQL because we couldn't afford to hire developers. I worked 70-hour weeks for 8 years straight while your father was sick. Who do you think kept this company alive when we had $340,000 in debt and 3 months of runway left? The room went silent. Richard's smirk faded. Melissa's jaw tightened in that way it did when she was a teenager and I'd caught her lying about where she'd been. That's exactly the problem, Mother. She said, Mother, like it was an insult. You're stuck in the past. You don't understand that we're not a garage startup anymore. We're a $45 million company with institutional investors and a board that expects professional management. I am professional management, I said. I'm the COO. I've held this company together. You've held us back. Melissa's voice cut like a knife. She walked closer, standing over me. Every meeting, you question my decisions. Every initiative, you find problems. Every vendor, every hire, every strategic pivot, you undermine me. I ask questions because someone has to, I replied, feeling heat rise to my face. Like why we're paying $67,000 a month to Richard's cousin's consulting firm for services we haven't received. Or why 3 senior engineers quit last month citing ethical concerns. Or why... Enough. Melissa's voice cracked through the room like a whip. She leaned down, her hands flat on the table, her face inches from mine. Your opinion means nothing here. You're just dead weight living off me. Off this company that I built into something successful, despite you dragging us down every step of the way. The words hit like physical blows. Around the table, 40 faces stared. Some shocked, some embarrassed. a few nodding in agreement. Richard lounged back in his chair, openly grinning now. I thought about the night my husband Thomas died 7 years ago, how Melissa had been too busy with a client dinner to come to the hospital, how I'd held his hand alone while he took his last breath, then driven myself home and cried in our empty bed for 3 hours before calling her, how she'd shown up the next morning, annoyed that I hadn't called earlier because it messed up her schedule. I thought about the $340,000 I'd borrowed against our house during the 2008 recession to make payroll when we had 43 employees and no revenue for 6 weeks. How I'd eaten ramen noodles and canceled my health insurance to save money. How Thomas and I had postponed his cancer treatments by 4 months because we couldn't afford both the treatments and the company payroll. I thought about the college tuition I'd paid in full, $187,000 for Stanford, so Melissa wouldn't graduate with debt. About the wedding I'd funded for $73,000 when she married Richard, even though I knew he was wrong for her. About the down payment on their house in Westlake, $120,000 that I'd given as a gift, but which they'd promised to repay and never did. I thought about coming into the office at 5:30 every morning for 23 years, about the weekends I'd worked, about the vacations I'd never taken, about the life with Thomas that I'd sacrificed because I believed I was building something meaningful, something that would last, something that would be ours. And then I did something I hadn't done in 40 years of marriage, motherhood, and business. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a nervous giggle. A real, full-throated laugh that echoed off the glass walls and made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. "Is something funny?" Melissa demanded, her face flushing red. I stood up slowly, gathering my reports into my leather portfolio, the one Thomas had given me 25 years ago when we'd incorporated the company. It was worn now, the corners frayed, but it had been with me through everything. "Very funny, actually," I said, still smiling. I looked around the room at all those faces. You know what the hilarious part is? You all think you know what's happening here. You think you're watching a difficult old woman get put in her place by her successful daughter. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. But here's what you don't know. What Melissa doesn't know, because she never bothered to read the original incorporation documents. The ones from 1998, filed with the Texas Secretary of State and never amended. Melissa's face went pale. Richard sat up straight. "Sleep well tonight," I said softly, looking directly at my daughter. "Tomorrow morning, check your email, and maybe have Richard read those documents before you have your coffee." I walked out. No one said a word. Behind me, I heard Richard's chair scrape as he lunged for his laptop. The elevator ride down 17 floors felt like flying. My phone buzzed continuously in my purse. Texts from Sarah in HR, from Marcus in sales, even from Jennifer, the receptionist. I ignored them all. In the parking garage, I sat in my 2015 Honda Civic, the same car I'd driven for 9 years because I'd believed we should reinvest profits into the company instead of flashy executive perks, and let myself feel it. The humiliation, the betrayal, the rage. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been avoiding for 6 months. Sarah Bennett Law Offices. "Sarah, it's Patricia. It's time. Activate everything we discussed." "Are you sure? Once we do this?" "I'm sure. They called me dead weight, in front of everyone. So let's show them exactly how much weight I've been carrying. I'll have the documents ready by morning." "Patricia?" "Yes? I'm sorry it came to this." "Don't be," I said, starting the car. I should have done this years ago. I drove home to my modest 3-bedroom house in Hyde Park, the house Thomas and I had bought 30 years ago for $89,000, now worth $740,000 thanks to Austin's real estate boom. The house Melissa had called embarrassing when she'd tried to convince me to move into a nice modern condo downtown. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd taught Melissa long division, where Thomas and I had argued about medical bills and kissed away tears and planned our futures, where I'd signed the original incorporation papers with hands that shook from exhaustion and hope. The safe in my office closet hadn't been opened in 6 years, not since Thomas's funeral. The combination was our wedding date, or 8/17/1985. Inside were the documents that would change everything: stock certificates, original partnership agreements, and one particular piece of paper that would make my daughter's very expensive lawyers very, very busy. I also pulled out a small leather journal Thomas had kept during the company's early days. His handwriting, neat, precise, exactly like him, filled page after page with calculations, strategies, and one entry dated March 15th, 2003. Patricia is the heart of this company. If anything happens to me, she must be protected. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with Jim Morrison at Morrison & Associates to set up protections. Melissa is brilliant, but impulsive. She'll need guidance. Patricia will provide it, whether Melissa likes it or not. And if Melissa ever tries to push Patricia out, well, I've made sure that would be legally impossible. Let this be my final gift to the woman who gave me everything. I traced his handwriting with my finger, letting tears fall onto the page for the first time in years. "Thank you, Thomas," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Thank you for knowing me better than I knew myself." At 11:47 p.m., I sent a single email to the company's board of directors, copying Melissa and Richard. To the board of EdTech Solutions. Effective immediately, I am exercising my rights under the original 1998 Articles of Incorporation, Section 7, Paragraph 3, regarding founder veto powers and asset protection clauses. A full board meeting is required within 72 hours per company bylaws. All supporting documentation will be provided by my legal counsel, Sarah Bennett, SND, of Bennett Law Associates. Sincerely, Patricia Caldwell, founder and principal shareholder. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in 7 years. The next morning arrived with 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I ignored them all while I made coffee in my quiet kitchen, watching the sunrise paint the Austin skyline in shades of pink and gold. At 8:47 a.m., my doorbell rang. Then rang again. Then someone started pounding on the door like the house was on fire. "Mother! Open this door right now." I took another sip of coffee before walking to the door. Through the peephole, I could see Melissa and Richard on my porch. She looked like she hadn't slept. He looked furious. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "What the hell is this?" Melissa shoved her phone in my face, showing my email. "Founder veto powers? Asset protection clauses? What are you talking about?" "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I said calmly. "Would you like some coffee?" "I want an explanation." Her voice cracked with barely controlled rage. "Richard's been on the phone with our lawyers all night. They're saying—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "They're saying this can't be real." "It's very real," I replied. "When your father and I incorporated EdTech Solutions in 1998, we built in certain protections. I never thought I'd need to use them against my own daughter, but here we are." Richard pushed past Melissa into my house uninvited. "This is insane. You can't just—" "Get out of my house, Richard." My voice was quiet but sharp. "You weren't invited in." "We need to talk about this," he said, not moving. "You're making a huge mistake. The board meeting you're demanding will destroy company morale, tank our valuation." "Funny how you're suddenly concerned about company valuation," I said. "Were you concerned when you approved $804,000 in consulting fees to your cousin Tyler's firm over the past 18 months? The firm that, according to my sources, doesn't actually exist beyond a P.O. box in Delaware." Richard's face went white. Melissa looked between us, confused. "What's he talking about, Richard?" "Nothing. She's lying. She's desperate and grasping at—" "I have the wire transfer records," I said. "All of them. Sarah's been helping me audit company financials for the past 6 months. Every questionable payment, every suspicious expense, every single dollar that doesn't add up. Would you like to see them?" The silence stretched like taffy. A neighbor walked by with their dog, waved cheerfully. I waved back. "Listen," Melissa said, her voice changing tactics to something softer, more pleading. "Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday. I was stressed. I said things I didn't mean. You're not dead weight. You're—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "Don't insult both of us by pretending this is about hurt feelings. You meant every word yesterday, and I'm grateful you said them, actually. They made something very clear that I'd been avoiding for years." "What?" she asked. "That you never loved me. You loved what I could do for you, what I could give you, what I could build for you. But me? The actual person? You've despised me since you were 16 years old, and I wouldn't let you drop out of high school to follow some boy to California. Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were real or strategic. She'd always been good at crying on command. That's not true. I love you. You're my mother. Then prove it, I said. The board meeting is in 72 hours. Come to it with honesty instead of lawyers. Answer questions about where company money has been going. Explain why we've lost 3 major clients in 6 months. Tell the truth about why Marcus Webb in sales is threatening to quit because Richard told him to falsify revenue projections. Richard's jaw clenched. You crazy bitch. You have no idea what you're— Get out of my house. I spoke each word carefully, clearly. Both of you. Now. Before I call the police. They left, but not before Richard turned at my doorstep and said, You're going to regret this. We have lawyers too. Better ones than you can afford. I'm sure you do, I replied. Paid for with company money, I assume? That'll be an interesting conversation for the board. After they left, I sat down at my kitchen table and let myself shake for exactly 5 minutes. Then I called Sarah. How bad? I asked. They've already filed an emergency motion to block the board meeting, she said. And Patricia? They're bringing in Winston and Marshall. That's a 800 per hour corporate litigation firm out of Dallas. They're not playing. Neither am I said. What else? Sarah hesitated. They're going to argue you're mentally incompetent. They have a doctor lined up. Some psychiatrist Richard knows from college, who's willing to testify that people your age often experience cognitive decline that affects business judgment. The shaking started again. They're trying to have me declared incompetent? It's a standard play in hostile corporate situations. If they can convince a judge you're not mentally fit to exercise your rights under the incorporation documents— I'm 63, Sarah, not 93. I run marathons. I learn new programming languages for fun. I know. That's why we're going to fight. But Patricia, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. They're going to dig into everything. Your finances, your health, your relationships. They'll try to paint you as a bitter, unstable woman who can't accept that her daughter succeeded where she failed. I didn't fail, I said quietly. I built that company from nothing. My doorbell rang again. This time it was a courier with a manila envelope marked Urgent, Legal Document. Inside was a letter from Winston and Marshall offering me a generous settlement, $200,000 cash, immediate resignation from all company positions, full release of any claims to company assets or future revenue, and a non-disparagement agreement preventing me from speaking publicly about EdTech Solutions or its leadership. There was also a deadline, 5 p.m. today, 14 hours to sign away 23 years of my life. At the bottom, in Melissa's handwriting, Mom, please be reasonable. This is more than fair. Take it and retire comfortably. We can try to rebuild our relationship without the stress of working together. I promise things will be better, M. I read it twice, then called Sarah back. They offered me $200,000 to go away. That's insulting. Your equity stake alone is worth at least $2 million based on last year's valuation. I know, but Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Find Timothy. I know he doesn't want to be found, but I need him. I need my son. Silence on the line. Then, Patricia, are you sure? After everything that happened, he's my son. And he deserves to know what his sister is doing to the company his father built. I'll find him, Sarah promised. But Patricia? Timothy's been gone for 5 years. He made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with the family or the company. What makes you think he'll help now? Because, I said, looking at the family photo on my mantle, Thomas, me, Melissa at 12, and Timothy at 7, all of us smiling at Zilker Park on a perfect Sunday afternoon, he's the one who always understood what this company was supposed to mean, and I think he'll want to save it as much as I do. At 4:53 p.m., 7 minutes before the deadline, I sent my response to Winston and Marshall. Declined. See you at the board meeting. PC. That night, someone spray-painted "greedy bitch" on my garage door. I painted over it the next morning, humming while I worked. The police officer who came to take the vandalism report was young, maybe 25. He looked at my garage door, now covered in fresh beige paint, and said, "Ma'am, without the original graffiti visible, there's not much we can do." "I took photos," I said, showing him my phone. He nodded, wrote something in his notepad. "Any idea who might have done this?" I thought about Richard's face when he'd left my house yesterday, the cold fury in his eyes. "No," I lied. "No idea." After he left, I sat in my kitchen drinking cold coffee and staring at my laptop. The company's internal server, which I still had access to despite everything, showed a flurry of activity: emergency board meetings, conference calls with investors, emails with subject lines like succession planning and founder liability issues. At 11:23 a.m., my personal bank account showed a new transaction. Withdrawal, $2,147. Due as you deemed, EdTech Solutions payroll, my salary. They'd stopped paying me. I called HR. Sarah Chen answered on the first ring, her voice tight. "Patricia, I'm so sorry. Richard sent a memo saying you'd been placed on administrative leave pending the board meeting. I didn't have a choice. It's okay, Sarah. I understand." "No, it's not okay. None of this is okay. There are things happening here that you need to know about. Can we meet? Somewhere private?" We met at a coffee shop in South Austin, far from the office. Sarah looked exhausted, her normally perfect makeup smudged, her hands shaking as she clutched her latte. "They're destroying everything," she said without preamble. "Every document you ever created, every email, every report. Richard has IT systematically purging the servers. He's calling it routine archive maintenance. But we both know what it really is. Can they do that? Legally? No. But they're doing it anyway. And Patricia, there's more." She pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "These are printouts I made before they locked me out of the finance systems. Look at page 7. I flipped through. There, in neat columns, were wire transfers dating back 3 years, not just to Richard's cousin's fake consulting firm, to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, to shell companies in Delaware and Nevada, to personal accounts belonging to Richard's brother, his college roommate, even Melissa's personal trainer. The total, $2. $7 million. Jesus Christ, I whispered. "It gets worse," Sarah said. Page 12. I turned to it. An email chain between Melissa and someone named David Chen at Pacific Rim Ventures. The subject line, "Acquisition offer, confidential." My hands went numb as I read. Melissa had been negotiating to sell EdTech Solutions to a Chinese investment firm for $12 million. The deal was structured to close 30 days after she gained full operational control, meaning after I was gone. The email was dated 6 months ago, before the public humiliation, before the legal threats. This had been planned for half a year. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The acquisition documents show the purchase price as $12 million. But look at this." She showed me another document. "This is the internal valuation Melissa commissioned from an independent firm 2 months ago. They valued the company at $23.5 million. She's selling it for half its value?" "Not exactly. Look at the payment structure." Sarah pointed to a clause highlighted in yellow. $4 million to company shareholders of record. The remaining $8 million paid as executive transition bonuses directly to Melissa and Richard. They weren't just stealing from the company. They were stealing from everyone. Employees, investors, me. And they were doing it legally, hiding it in corporate paperwork that no one would question until it was too late. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "You could lose your job. Worse, if Richard finds out." "My sister died of cancer 3 years ago," Sarah interrupted. She was 41, left behind 2 kids and a husband who had to sell their house to pay medical bills because her insurance company found a technicality to deny coverage. Her eyes were fierce. "Companies like this, people like Richard and Melissa, they destroy lives and sleep fine at night because they convince themselves it's just business. I won't be part of it anymore. Whatever you need, I'll help." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you." That afternoon, I drove to see my sister Irene in Round Rock. She lived in a neat suburban house with her husband Carl, a retired electrician. I'd been avoiding her calls for 3 weeks, knowing she'd ask questions I didn't want to answer. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. What happened? I told her everything. The humiliation, the legal threats, the financial fraud, the acquisition deal. She listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each detail. That ungrateful little bitch, she said finally, after everything you've done for her. Irene, no, don't defend her. I've watched you sacrifice for 23 years. Your health, your marriage, your happiness, all for a company you built so she could have a future. And this is how she repays you? I don't know what to do, I admitted. Sarah gave me documents, but I don't know if they're enough. Melissa has expensive lawyers and 3 more days to destroy evidence. And my voice broke. I can't afford to fight this. My savings are down to $47,000. Thomas's medical bills wiped out most of our retirement. If I hire lawyers who can match Winston and Marshall, I'll be broke in 3 months. Irene stood up, walked to her desk, and came back with a checkbook. How much do you need? I can't take your money. How much? Irene, you and Carl are retired. You worked 40 years to have a comfortable retirement. I won't. Patricia Caldwell. She used my full name like she was scolding a child. You paid for my wedding when I was 22 and broke. You paid for Carl's surgery when we had no insurance. You gave us $15,000 when we almost lost this house in 2009. You've given your whole life to everyone else. For once, let someone give back to you. She wrote a check for $75,000 and pressed it into my hands. That's from our savings. It's yours. Pay it back when you win, or don't pay it back at all. I don't care. What I care about is you not letting that spoiled brat destroy you. I cried then. Not the dignified tears I'd shed over Thomas's journal, but ugly, gasping sobs of exhaustion and fear and gratitude. When I finally stopped, Irene made tea, and we sat on her back porch watching the sunset. Have you talked to Timothy? She asked. Sarah's trying to find him. He's been off the grid for 5 years. Do you know why he left? I nodded slowly. He found out about something. Something Melissa did when she was 24. She embezzled $30,000 from a client's account to pay off her credit card debt. Thomas and I covered it up, paid back the money, convinced the client not to press charges. We thought we were protecting her, helping her learn from a mistake. But Timothy found out. He said we enabled her, said we taught her that she could do anything and we'd clean it up. He said as long as we kept protecting her, she'd keep getting worse. I stared at my teacup. He was right, and I was too proud to admit it. And he left because I chose her over him. He wanted me to report her to the authorities, to let her face real consequences. I refused. I said family protects family. So he said if that's what family meant to me, he didn't want to be part of it anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Caldwell, this is Timothy. Sarah Bennett found me. I'm flying in tomorrow. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time before I could breathe again. He's coming home, I whispered. That night, back in my house, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen Timothy. He'd been 30, working as a software engineer in Seattle, living a quiet life far from the family drama. We'd met for coffee when I'd flown out for a conference. Mom, he'd said, I love you, but I can't watch you destroy yourself for someone who doesn't appreciate it. When you're ready to stop enabling Melissa, call me. Until then, I need to stay away. I'd been furious. How dare he judge me? How dare he abandon his family? But sitting alone in my kitchen at 2 a.m., I finally understood. Timothy hadn't abandoned me. He'd been waiting for me to choose myself for once, and it had taken me 5 years and a public humiliation to finally do it. At 6 a.m., my doorbell rang again. This time I looked through the peephole and saw a tall man with gray-streaked brown hair and familiar blue eyes. I opened the door, and Timothy stood there holding 2 cups of coffee from Mozart's, my favorite cafe. Hi, Mom, he said. I hear you're finally ready to stop protecting people who don't deserve it. I couldn't speak. I just pulled him into my arms and held on while he held me back, and for the first time in 72 hours, I felt like maybe I could survive this after all. Let's go save Dad's company, he said quietly. The right way this time. Timothy spread documents across my kitchen table like a general planning a war. He'd changed in 5 years. Harder somehow. More focused. but his eyes still had that same gentle intelligence that reminded me so much of Thomas. "Okay," he said, sipping his coffee. "Let's start with what we know they don't know we know." Despite everything, I almost laughed. That's a lot of knowing. "I've spent 5 years as a cybersecurity consultant for Fortune 500 companies, Mom. Trust me when I say Melissa and Richard are amateurs at covering their tracks." He pulled up his laptop. "When Sarah contacted me, I did some digging. Nothing illegal, just public records, SEC filings, LinkedIn profiles. The picture that emerged is worse than you think." He showed me a flowchart he'd created. It looked like a spider web, with EdTech Solutions at the center and dozens of shell companies radiating outward. "Richard's been building this structure for 3 years," Timothy explained. "Every consulting firm he's paid is connected to someone he knows. His cousin Tyler's company paid $804,000, his college roommate's marketing agency, $340,000, his brother's legal advisory firm, $10,000. None of them do actual work. They just receive money, take a cut, and funnel it back to Richard through other channels. That's money laundering." "Exactly. And here's the beautiful part. Melissa signed off on every single payment. Her electronic signature is on all the approval documents. She can't claim ignorance." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, not quite sadness. Just a crystalline clarity about what needed to be done. "There's more," Timothy continued. "The acquisition deal with Pacific Rim Ventures? I did some research on David Chen, their CEO. Guess who his wife is?" "I don't. Melissa's college roommate, Jennifer Lee. They were best friends at Stanford. Still are, according to social media. This isn't an arm's-length transaction. It's a sweetheart deal designed to enrich Melissa at the company's expense." He pulled up an email he'd somehow obtained. I didn't ask how. Dated 8 months ago. Jennifer Lee to Melissa. "David is so excited about the acquisition. And don't worry, we'll make sure the bonus structure works exactly like you need it to. Your mom will never know what hit her." The casual cruelty of that sentence made me want to throw something. "How did you get this?" I asked. "I didn't. Sarah did, before they purged the servers. She's smarter than they gave her credit for. She's been backing up everything to an external drive for months. She had a feeling something was wrong. What else did she back up?" Timothy's smile was grim. "Everything. 3 years of financial records, emails, contracts, board meeting minutes. Melissa and Richard thought they were deleting evidence. They didn't realize Sarah had already preserved it all." He handed me a USB drive. "This is a copy. The original is in Sarah's safety deposit box. Another copy is with my attorney in Seattle. If anything happens to any of us, it automatically gets sent to the SEC, the IRS, and the FBI. Timothy, I'm not taking chances, Mom. These people tried to destroy you. They embezzled millions. They committed fraud. I'm not letting them win." We spent the next 6 hours building our strategy. Timothy had brought his attorney, a sharp woman named Rachel Wu who specialized in corporate fraud cases. She listened to everything, took notes, asked pointed questions. "The board meeting is tomorrow," she said finally. "Here's what we're going to do. Patricia, you're going to exercise your founder veto powers exactly as you planned. But we're also going to introduce a motion for an immediate independent audit of all company finances for the past 3 years. Can we do that? Under the original incorporation documents, any founder can request an audit with just cause. We have cause." She gestured to the mountain of evidence. "Once the audit is ordered, all financial records are frozen. They can't delete anything else. And with Sarah's testimony and backup files, we can prove what they've already destroyed." "They'll fight it," I said. "Of course they will. But here's the thing. Fighting it makes them look guilty. And the longer they fight, the more questions the other board members will ask. Right now, most of the board thinks this is just a family dispute. Once they see evidence of fraud, self-dealing, and corporate waste, they'll turn on Melissa and Richard so fast it'll make their heads spin." Timothy leaned forward. "There's one more thing, Mom. Something you need to decide right now because once we go down this path, there's no going back." "What?" "The 1998 incorporation documents, Dad's protections. They're not just veto powers, are they?" I met his eyes and saw that he knew. Somehow, he'd always known. No, I said quietly. They're not. Rachel looked between us, confused. What am I missing? Timothy answered for me. When my parents incorporated EdTech Solutions in 1998, my father was paranoid about protecting the company from hostile takeovers or internal coups. So he structured the ownership very carefully. Mom owns 35% of the voting shares. Melissa owns 15%. The remaining 50% is held in a trust. What trust? The Thomas Caldwell Family Trust. Beneficiary, Timothy Robert Caldwell. That's me. He pulled out a document. Dad set it up so the trust shares couldn't be voted until I turned 35, or until Mom requested they be activated in case of a corporate emergency. I turned 35 6 months ago. Rachel's eyes widened. Which means Timothy owns 50% of the company, I finished. Melissa isn't the majority shareholder. She never was. She's been CEO of a company she doesn't actually control. The room fell silent. She doesn't know this, Rachel said. It wasn't a question. Thomas died before we could tell her, I said. After the funeral, I couldn't bring myself to explain that her father had trusted Timothy more than her. It seemed cruel. And then Timothy left, and I thought maybe it didn't matter anymore. The trust was dormant. I had veto powers. I could keep things stable until you couldn't, Timothy said gently. Until I couldn't, I agreed. Rachel was already drafting documents. Okay, here's what happens tomorrow. Patricia exercises her founder veto to block any major decisions. Timothy activates the trust and assumes his voting rights. Together you control 85% of the company. Melissa can't do anything without your approval. She'll lose her mind, I said. Good, Timothy said coldly. Let her feel a fraction of what she made you feel. That evening, I made dinner. Real dinner. Not the microwave meals I'd been living on. Chicken parmesan, garlic bread, salad. Timothy set the table without being asked, just like he used to when he was a teenager. I'm sorry, I said as we ate, for choosing her over you. For not listening when you warned me about her. For wasting 5 years we could have spent together. Mom, no, let me finish. You were right about everything. I enabled her. I made excuses. I convinced myself that love meant protecting her from consequences. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Timothy was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, too. For leaving. For staying away so long. For not being there when Dad died. When you needed me. I was hurt and stubborn. And I punished you for caring too much. That was wrong, too. We finished dinner in comfortable silence. As I was washing dishes, Timothy said, For what it's worth, I think Dad would be proud of you. Finally drawing the line. Finally fighting back. You think so? I know so. He told me once, when I was maybe 14, that the only thing he feared was you losing yourself trying to save everyone else. He said you had a gift for loving people. But that same gift could destroy you if you weren't careful. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd watch out for you. Even if you didn't want me to. Is that why you came back? I came back because Sarah said you finally chose yourself, and I wasn't going to miss watching you take down the person who's been taking advantage of you for 20 years. At 9:47 p.m., I sent an email to the board. To the board of directors, tomorrow's emergency meeting will include the following agenda items. 1. Exercise of founder veto powers, per 1998, Articles of Incorporation. 2. Activation of Thomas Caldwell. Family Trust voting rights. 3. Motion for immediate independent audit of all corporate finances, 2021-2024. 4. Motion to suspend CEO and CFO pending audit results. All supporting documentation attached. Patricia Caldwell. Founder Timothy Caldwell, principal shareholder. Melissa called 37 seconds later. I let it go to voicemail. Then Richard called. Voicemail. Then Melissa again. And again. And again. At 10:15 p.m., someone started pounding on my door. Timothy looked through the peephole. It's her, he said. And Richard. They look insane. Don't open it. I'm calling the police, Timothy said, pulling out his phone. Through the door, we heard Melissa screaming, You can't do this. That trust doesn't exist. I'm the CEO. This is my company. Timothy raised his phone and started recording. For the record, he said calmly, It's 10:17 p.m. on March 14th. Melissa Caldwell and Richard Porter are attempting to forcibly enter Patricia Caldwell's residence after being told to leave. Police have been notified. The pounding stopped. Through the door, Richard's voice. This isn't over. We'll sue you for everything. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. We'll see you at the board meeting, Timothy called back. 9 a.m. sharp, don't be late. After they left, Timothy deadbolted the door and wedged a chair under the handle. You should stay somewhere else tonight, he said. A hotel, Aunt Irene's, anywhere but here. No, I said firmly. I'm not running anymore. This is my house. If they want to intimidate me, they can try. But I'm done being afraid. We stayed up until 2 a.m., reviewing documents and rehearsing what would happen at the meeting. Finally, Timothy crashed on the couch and I went to bed. I should have been terrified. Instead, for the first time in months, I felt powerful. Tomorrow, everything would change. The EdTech Solutions boardroom had never felt so cold. 9 board members sat around the oak table, the same table Thomas had commissioned when we moved into this building 15 years ago. I remembered him running his hand along the wood grain, saying, "This is where we'll make history, Patricia." He'd been right, just not the way he'd imagined. Melissa sat at the head of the table in a black Chanel suit that probably cost $4,000. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled in that effortless way that actually took 90 minutes and a professional. Richard sat beside her, his jaw tight, his hands clasped so hard his knuckles were white. The other board members looked confused and uncomfortable. David Martinez, our lead investor, kept checking his watch. Susan Park, who represented our institutional shareholders, had her arms crossed defensively. Marcus Webb from sales looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Timothy and I sat across from Melissa. Rachel Wu sat beside us with 3 file boxes of documentation. Sarah Chen was in the corner, ready to testify. At exactly 9 a.m., I called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, I began. I know this is unusual, but the matters we're discussing today couldn't wait. This is ridiculous, Richard interrupted. Patricia is trying to stage a coup because she can't accept that the company has outgrown her. This whole meeting is... Mr. Porter, Rachel said coldly, you'll have your chance to speak. Right now, Mrs. Caldwell has the floor. I took a breath. 15 days ago, my daughter called me dead weight in front of 40 employees. At the time, I was hurt and humiliated, but that humiliation led me to do something I should have done years ago, actually examine where this company's money has been going. I nodded to Rachel, who opened the first box. Over the past 3 years, Rachel said, distributing packets to each board member, EdTech Solutions has paid $7 million to various consulting and service firms. Page 3 shows a complete list. What you'll notice is that every single one of these firms is connected to Richard Porter or his family members. David Martinez flipped through his packet, his face darkening. Richard, what is this? Porter Consulting Associates. That's your cousin Tyler? Tyler runs a legitimate consulting business, Richard said quickly. We hired him because he offered competitive rates. Tyler Porter registered his LLC 3 weeks after he was hired by EdTech, Rachel interrupted. His business address is a UPS store in Delaware. He has no website, no other clients, no portfolio of work. In 18 months, he received $804,000 for services that were never actually delivered. Susan Park leaned forward. Are you telling us this is fraud? I'm telling you it's a pattern. Page 7 shows payments to Strategic Marketing Solutions, owned by Richard's college roommate. Page 11 shows payments to Legal Advisory Group, which is Richard's brother's firm, despite the fact that we already have external counsel. Every one of these entities was created shortly before receiving contracts, and not one of them has provided documentation of actual work performed. Melissa's face had gone pale. We were trying to keep costs down by using people Richard trusted. You were embezzling company funds, Timothy said quietly. There's a difference. Melissa looked at him like she'd been slapped. Timmy? What are you even doing here? My name is Timothy, he said, and I'm here because I'm the majority shareholder of this company, something you apparently didn't know. He slid a document across the table. Melissa grabbed it, her hands shaking as she read. This can't be right. Dad knew exactly what he was doing, Timothy said. He set up a trust, giving me 50% of the company because he trusted me to protect it. And to protect Mom from people who might try to take advantage of her. I'm not taking advantage, Melissa's voice cracked. I'm her daughter. I've run this company for 5 years. I've grown revenue by 340%. You've grown revenue by lying to investors, I said. Sarah, please show them the projections. Sarah Chen stood up, trembling but determined. She distributed another set of documents. These are the revenue projections Melissa and Richard presented to investors 6 months ago, Sarah explained. They show 340% growth over 5 years. But these, she distributed a second set, are the actual financial statements. Real growth was 127%. Still impressive, but nowhere near what was promised. You falsified investor documents? David Martinez stood up, his face red. Do you have any idea what the legal liability is for that? The SEC penalties alone. We didn't falsify anything, Richard said desperately. Those were projections, forecasts, not guarantees. Projections based on contracts you claimed were already signed, Rachel said. Page 15 shows emails where you told investors we had secured a 3-year contract with Dallas Independent School District worth $2 million. Sarah, do we have that contract? No, Sarah said. We pitched to Dallas ISD, but they rejected our proposal. Richard told me to keep that information confidential because he was negotiating a revision. That was 11 months ago. Marcus Webb from sales finally spoke up, his voice tight with anger. Richard told me to report that Dallas contract as pending execution in my quarterly reports. When I said that was misleading, he said if I didn't cooperate, he'd fire me for insubordination. I've been looking for another job for 6 months because I knew this would eventually blow up. The room erupted. Board members were shouting questions, demanding answers. Melissa sat frozen, tears running down her face, destroying her perfect makeup. Richard kept trying to speak, but Rachel cut him off every time with another piece of evidence. The acquisition deal, David Martinez said suddenly. You're in talks with Pacific Rim Ventures. Is that legitimate or is that more fraud? It's legitimate, I said. But it's also a sweetheart deal designed to enrich Melissa and Richard at everyone else's expense. The purchase price is $12 million, but an independent valuation, I slid another document across, puts the company's real value at $23.5 million. Additionally, the deal structure shows $8 million being paid as executive bonuses directly to Melissa and Richard. Susan Park's voice was ice. You were going to sell the company for half its value and pocket 2/3 of the purchase price yourselves? David Chen at Pacific Rim is married to Melissa's college roommate, Timothy added. This isn't an arm's-length transaction. It's theft disguised as a business deal. Melissa finally broke. She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. You don't understand, she shouted. None of you understand. Do you know what it's like living in her shadow? She pointed at me with a shaking hand. Patricia Caldwell, the genius entrepreneur. Patricia Caldwell, who built everything from nothing. Patricia Caldwell, who everyone loves and respects. No matter what I did, I was never good enough. Never smart enough. Never her. Her voice broke completely. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I was worth something, that I could build something without her hovering over me, questioning every decision, making me feel like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. The acquisition deal. Yes, I was going to make money from it, but I was also going to finally own something that was mine. Just mine. Not hers. Not Dad's. Mine. The raw pain in her voice made something twist in my chest. For just a moment, I saw her as she'd been at 7 years old, crying because she'd come in second place at the science fair. Second place to me, who'd been a volunteer judge. I'd tried to comfort her, but she'd pushed me away, screaming, I hate you. I'll never be as good as you. Melissa, I said softly. No. She wiped her eyes viciously. You want to know the truth? I was terrified. Terrified of failing, of looking stupid, of everyone realizing I didn't deserve to be CEO. So I listened to Richard when he said we needed to inflate projections to attract investors. I signed off on his consulting payments because he said that's how business worked. I agreed to the acquisition because I thought... Her voice cracked again. I thought if I sold the company for enough money, I could finally stop feeling like a fraud. Richard grabbed her arm. Melissa, don't say anything else. They're recording this. You're giving them ammunition. She yanked her arm away. I don't care anymore. I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being so afraid all the time that I turned into someone I don't even recognize. She looked at me, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw past the armor to the terrified girl underneath. Mom, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything Dad built. I know I treated you like garbage when you gave me everything, but I'm asking anyway. Please, help me. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to. I swear I want to. The room went silent. Every eye turned to me, waiting to see what I would do. Timothy's hand found mine under the table. I looked at him and saw the same question in his eyes that must have been in mine. Was this real? Or was it another manipulation? Could Melissa actually change? Or would forgiveness just enable her to hurt us again? The audit, David Martinez said into the silence. We need to complete the independent audit before any decisions are made about leadership. I motion that both Melissa Caldwell and Richard Porter be suspended with pay pending the audit results. Seconded, Susan Park said immediately. All in favor? Martinez asked. Every hand went up except Melissa's and Richard's. Even Marcus Webb, who'd been silent through most of the meeting, voted yes. Richard stood up violently, his chair falling backward. This is insane. You're destroying the company based on allegations from a bitter old woman who can't accept that her time is over. We'll fight this. We have rights. We have contracts. You have nothing, Rachel said flatly. Your employment contracts include morality clauses and provisions for immediate termination in cases of fraud or malfeasance. You'll be lucky if suspension is all that happens to you. Timothy stood up, and I saw him look at his sister, really look at her, for the first time since he'd entered the room. Melissa, he said quietly, do you mean it? That you want to fix this? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes. God, yes. I've been drowning for so long and I didn't know how to ask for help without admitting I was failing. Timothy looked at me. In his eyes, I saw the same war I was fighting, the desire to protect ourselves versus the hope that maybe, possibly, family could be salvaged. Mom, he said, it's your call, but whatever you decide, I'll support you. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. I walked around the table to where Melissa stood, small and broken, and nothing like the polished CEO who'd called me dead weight 2 weeks ago. I'll help you, I said, but not like before. No more protecting you from consequences. No more covering up mistakes. If you want to fix this, you'll do it the hard way. You'll face the audit. You'll cooperate with investigators. You'll apologize to every employee you lied to, every investor you misled, and you'll work your way back up from the bottom. I will, she said. Anything. I'll do anything. Richard, I said, turning to my son-in-law, you need to leave. Pack your office today. The company will be filing criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. I suggest you get an attorney. His face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. All of you. I have copies of documents that will bury this company. The documents you copied last week have been flagged by our IT department, Rachel said. Attempted theft of confidential corporate information. Add that to your attorney's list. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Timothy must have arranged it beforehand. They escorted Richard out while he shouted threats that echoed down the hallway. After he was gone, Melissa collapsed into her chair, her head in her hands. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said. We figure out how to save this company. Together. As a family. The way we should have been doing all along. Timothy squeezed my shoulder. And I knew that whatever happened next, at least I wouldn't be facing it alone. 3 months later, I sat in my office, my old office, the one I'd designed when we moved into this building, and watched the sunrise paint Austin in shades of gold and amber. The view never got old. My door opened, and Timothy walked in with 2 cups of coffee, just like he had that first morning at my house. Morning, co-CEO, he said, handing me one. Morning, co-CEO, I replied. We'd agreed to share the title temporarily until we stabilized the company and figured out permanent leadership. It was working better than I'd expected. Melissa's downstairs, Timothy said. She's been here since 6 a.m. I checked my watch, 7:23. That's the 4th time this week. 5th, she came in Saturday too. For 3 months, Melissa had been working as what we officially called a strategic operations associate, which was corporate speak for entry-level everything. She answered phones, filed paperwork, sat in on meetings and took notes, ran errands. She made $42,000 a year, which was $298,000 less than her CEO salary had been. She never complained once. How is she doing? I asked. Timothy considered. Good days and bad days. Yesterday she cried in the supply closet because she had to explain to a client why their contract had been delayed due to previous management irregularities. But then she stayed 3 hours late helping Sarah organize archived files. She's trying, Mom. Really trying. And Richard? Timothy's face hardened. Arraignment is next week. Federal prosecutors have him on wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. His attorney is pushing for a plea deal, but they're talking about 8 to 12 years. The news should have made me feel something: triumph, satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. Has Melissa visited him? Once. She filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. He called her from jail screaming that she'd betrayed him, that everything was her fault for being too weak to stand up to you. Timothy's jaw clenched. She came back to the office afterward and worked until midnight without saying a word to anyone. I stared at my coffee, remembering the girl who'd graduated from Stanford with honors, who'd dreamed of changing education, who'd somewhere along the way convinced herself that success meant crushing the people who loved her. She asked to meet with you today, Timothy said. Said she has something important to discuss. Something about the future. Did she say what? No. But Mom? I think you should hear her out. At 9 a.m., Melissa knocked on my office door. She wore a simple gray dress from Target. I'd seen it in their catalog for $30.99 and minimal makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the daughter I remembered before ambition had poisoned her. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. Thank you for seeing me. Of course. Sit down. She perched on the edge of the chair across from my desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the board meeting, about doing things the hard way, about facing consequences. She took a breath. I met with the federal prosecutors yesterday. Voluntarily. My heart stopped. Melissa, I told them everything I knew about Richard's schemes, all the shell companies, all the fake invoices, all the investors we misled. I gave them access to his personal email accounts. I still had his passwords, and showed them how he structured the offshore accounts. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. My attorney said I was insane, that I was incriminating myself, but I couldn't keep lying. Not anymore. What did the prosecutors say? They're offering me immunity in exchange for testimony, full cooperation, complete transparency, and I walk away with no criminal charges. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm taking the deal, but I'm also stepping down from the company completely. What? Melissa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm. I've spent 3 months here watching you and Timothy rebuild everything I tried to destroy. I've seen how employees look at you, with respect, not fear. I've seen how clients trust you in a way they never trusted me. And I've realized something. What? I don't want to be CEO. I never really did. I wanted to prove something to you, to Dad, to myself. But what I proved was that I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready for that kind of power. And that's okay. She pulled an envelope from her bag and placed it on my desk. This is my resignation, effective immediately. It also transfers my 15% equity stake into a trust for my future children, if I ever have any, with you and Timothy as trustees. I don't want the temptation of that ownership hanging over me. I need to figure out who I am without it. I stared at the envelope, unable to process what I was hearing. What will you do? Melissa smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked genuine. I've been accepted into a master's program at UT Austin, education policy. I want to learn how to actually help schools instead of just selling them software. It's a 2-year program. After that, she shrugged. I don't know. Maybe I'll work for a nonprofit. Maybe I'll teach. Maybe I'll finally figure out what I'm passionate about when it's not about proving I'm as good as Patricia Caldwell. Tears burned my eyes. You were always as good as me, sweetheart. You were just trying so hard to be different that you couldn't see how amazing you already were. Melissa started crying too. We sat there across the desk from each other, two women who'd hurt each other terribly, trying to find a way back. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. Why did you help me? At the board meeting, you could have destroyed me. You had every right to. Why didn't you? I thought about Thomas, about the journal entry where he'd written about protecting our family, about Timothy's 5-year absence and the pain it had caused both of us, about all the ways love can go wrong when we forget to balance it with truth. Because destroying you wouldn't have fixed anything, I said. It would have just made me someone I didn't want to be. And because, my voice broke, because you're my daughter, and I've been waiting 20 years for you to be ready to be saved. I wasn't going to miss my chance when it finally came. Melissa came around the desk and hugged me, and I held her the way I'd held her when she was small and scared, and convinced the world was too big for her. Maybe it still was. Maybe it was too big for all of us. But at least now we could face it together. I love you, Mom, she whispered. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember how. I love you too, baby. And I'm sorry I forgot that sometimes the best way to show love is to let people fall and then help them get back up. After Melissa left, Timothy came back in. She resigned, I said. I know. She told me this morning. He sat down heavily. How do you feel about it? Relieved? Terrified? Hopeful? All of it at once. I looked at my son, this man who'd become my partner in ways I'd never expected. What about you? You've put your life on hold for 3 months to help me save this company. When do you get to go back to Seattle, to your own career? Timothy smiled. Funny you should mention that. I've been talking to some people. There's a growing market for cybersecurity in the education tech space. A lot of schools are getting hacked, losing student data, facing ransomware attacks. I was thinking EdTech Solutions could expand into that field. With your education expertise and my security background, we could actually build something sustainable, I finished. Not just profitable, but meaningful. Exactly. So if the offer's still open, I'd like to stay, officially, as your actual co-CEO, not just temporary disaster management. I felt something bloom in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The offer is absolutely open. But Timothy, I want you to really think about this. Running a company with your mother isn't exactly... It's exactly what I want, he interrupted. I spent 5 years away, Mom. I'm not wasting any more time. We're going to build something Dad would be proud of, and we're going to do it right this time. We shook hands across the desk, then laughed and hugged instead. There's one more thing, Timothy said. Sarah Chen wants to be our new CFO. She's got her CPA, 10 years of financial management experience, and most importantly, she's honest. I think we should offer her the position. Absolutely. What's she making now? $67,000 as HR director. Offer her $145,000 in equity. She saved this company as much as we did. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Thomas was buried. I'd been avoiding it since the board meeting, not sure what I'd say to him. I sat on the grass next to his headstone, simple gray granite with his name, dates, and the inscription, Beloved Husband and Father, and told him everything. I think we did it, I said. Timothy's staying. Melissa's getting help. Richard's going to prison. The company's going to survive. It's not perfect, but it's real. It's honest. It's what you wanted it to be. The wind rustled the oak trees around the cemetery, and I imagined it was Thomas saying he was proud. I miss you, I whispered, every single day. But I'm okay now. I'm going to be okay. I placed fresh flowers on his grave, wildflowers from the farmer's market, the kind he used to bring me, and drove home. That evening, Irene came over with homemade lasagna. So, she said, settling into my kitchen like she belonged there. Are you going to tell me what happens next? Or do I have to guess? What happens next, I said, is I run a company with my son, help my daughter figure out who she is, and finally start living the life I postponed for 23 years. What does that look like? I thought about the pottery class I'd signed up for, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. About the trip to Italy Timothy and I were planning for next spring. About the little house in the hill country I'd been looking at. The one with the garden and the view and no memories of corporate betrayal. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But for the first time in years, I get to find out. 6 months after the board meeting, EdTech Solutions held its annual company party. We'd downsized to 73 employees after the scandal, but the ones who'd stayed were the good ones, the ones who believed in the mission more than the money. I stood in the corner of the rented event space, watching Timothy give a presentation about our new cybersecurity division. Watching Sarah Chen, our new CFO, laugh at something Marcus Webb said. Watching employees who'd been silent and scared 6 months ago now chatting freely, relaxed, hopeful. And in the back of the room I saw Melissa. She'd come to the party even though she no longer worked here, dressed in jeans and a UT sweatshirt, looking more comfortable than I'd ever seen her in a $4,000 suit. Our eyes met across the room. She raised her glass of sparkling water and a small toast. I raised mine back. She mouthed, "Thank you." I mouthed back, "I love you." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Melissa and I still had hard conversations ahead of us. Richard's trial would drag our names through the news. The company would struggle for quarters to come as we rebuilt trust with clients and investors. But we were free. Free from lies, from manipulation, from the poisonous belief that love meant sacrificing yourself completely. Timothy appeared at my elbow. "You look contemplative." "I'm just thinking about how 3 months ago I thought my life was over. And now it's just beginning," he finished. "The right way this time." "The right way," I agreed. As the party wound down and employees started leaving, I walked to my car in the parking garage, not the old Honda Civic anymore, but a sensible Tesla that Timothy had insisted I deserved, and sat for a moment before starting it. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Coffee next week? There's something I want to ask your advice about. Not business. Just life." I typed back, "Tuesday at 10? Mozart's like old times?" "Perfect. Love you, Mom." "Love you too, sweetheart." I drove home through the Austin night, past the house I was selling next month, toward the future I was finally brave enough to build. And for the first time in 23 years, I felt like Patricia Caldwell, not Patricia Caldwell the sacrifice, not Patricia Caldwell the enabler, not Patricia Caldwell the victim, just Patricia, finally, completely, triumphantly myself. Thank you for reading my story. If you've experienced something similar, family betrayal, corporate manipulation, or the painful process of learning to choose yourself, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling me, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have forgiven Melissa? And if you have your own story of standing up to family injustice, please share it. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. Remember, you are never too old to reclaim your power. You are never too invested to walk away from toxicity. And you are never wrong for finally choosing yourself. With love and hard-won wisdom, Patricia Caldwell, Austin, Texas.